Today, guys, is I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what the Viewmetrics solution is, and I'm going to talk about what we've learned as we piloted and investigated its fit into the aviation market. Viewmetrics is a company that's been doing business in the commercial space and ground transport, and a number of the typical kind of critical infrastructure places where they've got a heavy security focus. And we sort of come from the background of surveillance cameras and surveillance and access control equipment. And what we're finding as we delve into the aviation market, which is where I come from, is that there are many more solutions and systems and cameras and devices and edge components that actually are coming into play in the aviation market, and that this may only add value to the ability to centralize the monitoring and alerting around those things. So there's the traditional things that are the common things we've seen in lots of industries, and then there are new things that we're seeing in the aviation industry. And I'll be interested to hear some of that. And I think so. I like to say that really what Viewmetrics offers is quite a simple software solution. We're kind of an overlay that's OEM agnostic, that sits on top of lots of the kinds of devices that you have across your facility. And as I say, outside of aviation, we've had great success with organizations using this particularly in complex security environments, but also geographically distributed environments, which isn't exactly airports, but airports do have a tremendous amount of cameras for the size of their airports. They have a number of components of equipment that sit behind those cameras to make sure that they're working and recording and retaining. And that's really what the solution is designed to do, is to create a kind of single pane of glass dashboard that gives you the ability to, at a glance, see that everything is up and functioning, both at the very moment, but also historically. Have there been any outages? Have there been any areas that might be in a pre-fault condition? And giving you the information, sort of soup to nuts, about how a camera or any device is functioning, so that you can see that the end device itself, the edge device, is functioning correctly and up to date, but also all the network equipment that feeds that, all the server equipment that may be recording or supporting that, CPU utilization, UPSs, everything are all in a good state, so that that you're getting the retention and the recordings, et cetera, when you talk just about video. But obviously the server is behind lots of these types of systems. It really gives you a snapshot view that helps not only ensure that you know what's going on with your environment, but it helps you troubleshoot to figure out where your problem may be. A camera may not be functioning correctly for many, many reasons, as we all know. Being able to see all the components of that system in one view is really the key here. That gives me the ability to see, well, actually the camera is fine, but the switch behind it is being overloaded, or the CPU utilization is high, or disk space, or whatever it is, if that makes sense. And that's really, to me, it's kind of a simple thing to understand. The key difference here, of course, is that this is an OEM agnostic solution. So this allows you to bring in underneath it for monitoring lots of different pieces of equipment. As long as they're accessible via the network and are IP based, then we can bring them in under that single pane of glass. And as I mentioned to some of the folks that joined here early, we've been delving into the aviation market. We're piloting this solution over the last 3 months at San Diego International Airport. They've been using this on about 50 or so cameras. They are, Ed, similar to you guys. They're putting in a new VMS environment. They're upgrading their camera equipment to newer technologies, and they're transitioning their airport from about 1,100 cameras to about 2,200 cameras as they're building out a new terminal there. So this has really been tested to see how it can monitor the legacy equipment as well as the new equipment that's coming in play. And a lot of these airport challenges are really sort of quotes we've taken from them over the 3 months that we've been piloting and learning better what value the solution can bring to the aviation market. And hopefully some of these will resonate with you. So I've already touched on the point that the reliance on cameras and IoT devices in airports is just only increasing and getting more complex. We all know that we've got lots of surveillance cameras, which even those are getting more complex. They're getting, more and more of them. But on top of that, there's cameras for lots of different types of systems that are monitoring things as simple as bathroom usage, exit lanes, perimeter technology, shooter detection, lots and lots of things, queue management, you name it. There's, facial recognition are all becoming part of the sort of operational aspects of an airport. And they're something that I think, that's really what we've heard from the airports market, is that they would like something that's, they don't have to look in all the different places to find out how things are going. But right at the heart of it is really the complexity of all the surveillance cameras, and how do you know that they're all working at one time? The kind of things we've heard from airports as we've talked with them, and Ed, maybe you can comment, but many airports, at least larger airports, are using third-party, systems integrators, maintenance folks who are contracted to help them manage the sort of health and maintenance of their, security environments. Sometimes it could be their access control specifically, sometimes it's surveillance, sometimes it's both, but they're kind of working hand in glove with the airport staff themselves to help make sure this, this equipment is all being maintained. And really, we'll talk about how Vunetrix can play a significant role in helping you manage those kinds of different stakeholders, whether they're third party or not. There really is the ability to allow multiple stakeholders to get value from this and to sort of have oversight on what other teams and departments are doing, so we can sort of have a better feel for our liability and our risks associated with some of these components for disruptions and, of course, security incidents. Ed, we talked about you guys' major project there. We're talking about the project in San Diego. That's one thing we're seeing as airports really continue to expand. And I think now that's accelerating kind of post-COVID, as sort of the construction industry and supply chains get back to work. We're seeing those projects really get underway. And a lot of that expansion is, airports are taking as an opportunity to introduce some of those new technologies, more and more equipment. In a new terminal, you're going to probably put more cameras. They're going to be more complex. You might think about those different monitoring solutions, et cetera. So the construction projects, I think, are driving a lot more of that equipment in a more rapid pace than we would see traditionally. And then the point that at San Diego, as they're moving across to replacing legacy equipment with new, they've got literally years that they'll be running the old stuff with the new stuff in parallel. They know the new stuff is where there's likely to be problems, but they also need to be able to maintain both of those. So having a solution that can kind of do both allows them to run multiple VMSs for a period of time during that transition. And then I think, it's kind of what I've already said to some level, but when we talk about monitoring systems, every airport that I speak to, every organization that we speak to at Vunetrix, whether it's an airport or not, says, well, IT's got monitoring solutions. We're using SolarWinds. We're using this. We're using that. I think that's where we've learned some of the most interesting things at San Diego, where we've had the security department, and they use a third-party system integrator to help them maintain their environment. IT has all of that, and they are monitoring those switches. They are monitoring a lot of the network backbone, but out to the edge, they don't do anything with those things. They don't know what a camera is doing. And frankly, they don't know when a camera is being replaced or upgraded or changed. And they don't want to know. And the information that they're gaining from monitoring the switches and different hardware is really not being communicated very directly back to security. So security likes the idea of being able to put an overlay that they control, that they configure in the ways they'd like, that goes all the way to the edge for the devices that they're interested in. And particularly with some of this operational equipment we're talking about with exit lanes and things like that, it kind of falls between IT and security, like who owns it, the FIDs, the bids, who's managing that stuff. IT's kind of got the servers, but there really is a value to have a kind of business focused point of view on monitoring systems, whether it's security ops or somewhere in between. The other thing we've seen, and this is across industries, not just aviation, is that when we install our product, and the general rule is about 3 to 5% of any environment security equipment is in a failed or a pre-failed state. I think most people agree with that. They realize that that's just part and parcel to having that much equipment in play. There's going to be some problem with some of the stuff at all times. And so, it really just points out that the challenge is how do you sort of prevent that from biting you in the backside when an incident occurs. And then, and this has been proven out multiple times. San Diego's already told us, and many of our customers have told us, that there are many issues that they were able to discover and remediate that they would never have been made aware of without a solution like this. And hopefully you'll see why that is as we go through this. So the blue boxes here kind of explain the central solution of Unetrics and kind of where we've been. And to the right here, you'll see some of the things that, as I've been talking about, we're seeing the aviation market see value to include this type of equipment. So, just having quality video when you need it, your VMS, your surveillance cameras, any analytics that are, behind those, perimeter detection systems, exit lane shooters, et cetera. The video quality is critical. And we have integrations to many of the common VMSs, and we're always building new VMS integrations. So we can pull data right from the edge device of the camera, all the components that sit between the camera and the VMS, all the way back to the server, including interrogating the VMS through its API to get all the data that you would get through the native system into our central system, and then combine that with things like access control, any identity management that you might have running at the airport, for credentialing of airport workers, all the network side of things, which again, that may be overlap to what IT are doing, but from a troubleshooting standpoint, and this is what we've heard from San Diego, if you're having problems with camera, video quality, knowing that the network infrastructure behind that camera is all in good standing and working correctly eliminates that as a variable in when you're troubleshooting something. And they say that IT might be monitoring that, but they may not be, they may not have access to that at the time they need to get that camera's, troubleshot and resolved. So having that full view, even if it's a double view from what IT are doing, gives them that full picture. Communication systems, emergency phones, intercoms, visual display systems that we talk about, are traditional things that we're connecting to in other markets. But again, that kind of leans right over into some of the stuff that are in the operational side for aviation, where we've got one sort of category of camera, things we've already touched on, facial biometrics, queue management, passenger flow, et cetera. And then operational systems, building management solutions, FIDs, bids, CTX scanners, SCADA equipment and baggage, et cetera, which can all, again, be monitored. And when we talk about this, that sounds like a pretty broad spectrum of things operating in the airport, but this is a configurable user-based or role-based system that allows you to segregate out which pieces of equipment are in the dashboard based on your role. When you log in, you're only going to see what you're responsible for. Maybe it's the parking garage, the parking operator gets to see the cameras in their space or the equipment in their space, license plate readers, whatever it is. And the airport itself could see basically everything. So based on your role within this, you're going to be able to allow stakeholders access to the information that they may be responsible for or interested in. through that kind of single pane of glass. The key thing that makes us different, I would say, from the native solutions, which most systems have some means. I mean, even a VMS, you can go in and see how the camera's operating and get a lot of the data. The problem is you literally have to go in and look. You have to go proactively go and physically do that. And that's what we've heard from airports is frequently they are, in smaller airports, the size of RSW or something like that. Many times people are just going in and looking, or they're just waiting for, someone in an SOC to say, hey, that camera's out, I can't see anything. Somebody go look at it. So basically reactive. There's just really nothing proactively being done. And when they are doing something proactive, it's kind of manually intensive and really subject to error because you can only look at so much at any one time. You go and you check a camera at 7 a.m. and it looks great. That doesn't tell me what it's doing the other 24 and a half hours that it's operating, 24/7, 365. So the key real difference is our ability to automatically alert on any pre-fault state or fault state so that we can send either an SMS or an email out to the right stakeholders, again, based on users and role-based users. We can send those emails to different people, and I'll show you one of those emails. The idea is that you don't have to be everyone be a user of Unetrics and be looking at dashboards. You can receive an email and see the data and the troubleshooting context for what's within that, what's around that device and what might be causing the issue. So when you think about people who are in the field working around the airport, they're not having to sit in front of a computer or in the SOC or AOC looking at this. And what that leads to is the ability to report historically too on how many events we've had, how many incidents did someone have to resolve, how quickly was it resolved. And that allows us to drive things like SLA reporting to third parties or even to stakeholders inside the airport, et cetera. We'll look at the dashboard, we'll look at a geomap. Geomap's not super important in airports, but we've been playing around with it at San Diego, and there is some value to it. You guys can make your own decision if you're in one site typically, but you do have quite a few buildings and rental car centers and things like that, parking garages, et cetera, that might sort of fit on a kind of geomap view. Reporting, we'll show you some of that, but obviously, now you've got all this data coming into a database that tells us uptime statistics, every time there's been an event, how often it's happened. Now you can delve into that and slice and dice that in many, many ways and automatically send those out to the different stakeholders who might be interested in that information. That helps drive, new system replacements, or there's a camera that's been playing up and after this many times it's just cheaper for us to replace that or whatever it is. And I already talked about some of the off-the-shelf integrations. We have a library of the common devices that are used in both physical security and operational systems inside a facility. And so that allows us to very quickly auto-discover devices and install this system in a matter of days without a lot of configuration. I've been in this security industry for many years, and I've seen one of the pitfalls that we have with very smart solutions is they tell you they're going to do X, Y, and Z, and they can do all that. The problem is you have to tell them what to do. If they sense this and they see that, what would you like them to do? Well, now you have to think of everything, of every combination, and basically tell the system to do it. It has the ability to configure that, but boy, you've got to spend your time doing that, and you have to have thought of everything. And if you haven't thought of it, it's not going to do anything helpful. So this I really like because one, we can auto-discover the devices that are out there on the network that we can monitor. So it's very easy to pick up new devices. And then we can auto-learn on usual state. So you have the ability to configure this to set thresholds for upper and lower limits of different things you might be tracking on. But you can also have it just monitor on an usual state to ensure that over time, if I see that a bandwidth coming in or out of a camera, is in this range, and now I see something after 10 days, I've seen that it's always within this range, and now something occurs differently, that can cause a warning to pick up that alerts you to, hey, go pay attention to this, have a look at this device and see if there's something that might be changed or faulty within that that device. Additionally, we can auto restart Windows services. I mean, in general, it's not a solution that solves problems for you. It is more of an alerting system, in a proactive way, but we can restart Windows services and things like that to help make sure if we do send something down, we can at least try to get it back up through a simple restart. Any questions while I take a breath? Okay. Everybody's good? Talk about
So good.
Okay, great. Everybody's here. And I really, from where I come from personally, and you guys have got good experience in this area of physical security. This really is a lightweight solution. It's effectively a low cost. It's a low installation. 85% of this is off the shelf. Most of our reporting just comes out of the box. So you can go and customize and do what you'd like along the way. But as we're learning, particularly right now with San Diego, there's a lot of value that comes right out of the box with them. We installed for about 50 cameras at San Diego in about a day, right? And now they're taking it as they wish, as they want to. They can go in and adjust and configure and set things up to the way they like it, but you're going to get value from day one on this. And then you can only increase its value to you by configuring and making it purpose-built for your different teams and stakeholders, setting up more automation, et cetera. So that, I think, is what makes it really different than some of the traditional monitoring softwares, the SolarWinds that I was talking about. Those systems are very complex, they're very capable, and arguably you could say they do everything that we do. You just have to go in and configure it all. You have to start from scratch and bake it yourself, with all the ingredients, and create all of the capabilities. This is designed to be much more of an out-of-the-box, lightweight installed, intuitive to use for physical security and operational teams who aren't IT experts that need to know, some of that detail and don't and have this wide array of devices that have a lot of different data, because let's face it, different devices are going to provide us different sensor data coming back to us. So it's not all apples and apples in the way it might be if you're monitoring network switches, for example, where they're all pretty much the same. Maybe a different device might give you some different things, but they try to standardize on it. In this world, it's hard to completely standardize, and you want to bring in these different types of devices. So the way you configure it and the way you view it and use it has to be easily adaptable to your stakeholder environment, to your people environment. Makes sense. So this is kind of what we've seen in airports and other places. I'm not going to read you all this, but I'd say the big thing is, of course, the proactivity of the solution like this. And the other thing that we hear really is this bottom point, about 80% first trip resolution, is that the ability to have contextual information around a problem allows people to much more quickly troubleshoot and resolve an issue. You guys may or may not be familiar. Last year, the MTA in New York, the Metro Transit Association, had a camera that was playing up. It had a bandwidth issue in the network, wasn't working well. They'd seen it kind of up and down over some weeks. They were trying to figure out what to do with it. Unfortunately, a shooting occurred on one of their platforms that was in the area where one of those cameras was aimed, and they were not able to capture any of the video that they needed to support the investigation. And a shooter effectively was unfilmed in that event. And of course, they've been in touch with us since then, but which is why we know about that, because it's kind of driven their interest here. But that's the kind of thing where, had they had equipment like this, we wouldn't have solved it for them immediately, but we would have given them a lot better understanding of why that camera wasn't working for them. Because again, it wasn't the camera itself, it was the network behind it. And by having that full view, rather than having it siloed where the network equipment is under IT's responsibility, the end device is under the security's responsibility, along with the footage and the retention and all of that, it brings it all into one sort of single pane of glass. a different stakeholder. I mean, it is a web-based system. Everything is, you can do everything from a computer or a tablet. But if you're a recipient of one of these emails based on your role, so this camera is my responsibility in Terminal 1 departures area. So I see a bandwidth error come up. This is what I'm going to get, is I get the warning. I get to include information here. So it tells me what the problem is. I've had we're below the limit of 5,000 kilobits in the traffic out. And then we can write in what we'd like to notify. So this is what I wrote. This camera's bandwidth is below the expected limit. Please contact the SOC to verify picture quality and the milestone system. So you can write in anything you want that allows them, functionally to know what they should be doing. Now you're getting the uptime, the downtime, the coverage, how long this system's been monitored, how often it's being pinged. So every 15 seconds, we know this camera is good or bad. And I can, through this system, if I am a user, I can click through this. This is, an active email that I can acknowledge the alarm, I can pause it, I can resume, I can do different things with it. But I also get the information in the last 30 minutes. What's this camera been doing? What's it been doing in 2 days, 30 days, along with, all the stats on this camera, what traffic in and traffic out was in the last volume, and all the history. So I don't need to necessarily be sitting in front of a dashboard and using the system. This really provides all the detail I need to give me a good understanding of how to troubleshoot this, as well as acknowledging the alarm and picking it up. We've also had the discussion with a number of clients about using centralized notification systems like a ServiceNow or an Everbridge. These can be routed through those systems, so you can have a common communications platform. We can easily hand this information off to those systems if that's something you're already using, in your environment. Just a quick PowerPoint of what our dashboard is. I'll show you what it looks like. But effectively, we have a core component of software that's sitting on a Windows-based server in your environment. It can be on the cloud. In airports, I think we're pretty much always talking about on-premises from a cybersecurity point of view. So that's where the main things are happening on this solution. And then we use site probes, which are effectively Windows agents that are running services out on different components of the network, which will help us distribute the load. I mean, if we're checking every camera every 15 seconds, for example, there's quite a bit of traffic happening there. So the probes allow us to distribute that. And those are the probes are what's actually interrogating the devices themselves across the different range of things. So we don't really license the probes. You can have as many of those as you need to distribute, for the volume that you have in your environment, but you need one core component, and then everyone accesses that through a web-based view that we'll go through and take a look at. But again, it allows us to segregate this up as you wish. So, if people are only responsible for one part of this, that's all they'll see. They won't see the whole thing, etc. And here's something that I think is really a valuable output of this, and something that is very hard to get with any native systems. So being able to produce a kind of SLA report that tells us, the availability percentages, the historical fault detail, bringing historical information around what's been happening over the past 30 days, the last quarter, whatever it is, very, very difficult in these solutions. You can see what's happening at the moment through your VMS very, very easily, but knowing what's been happening over any kind of historical view is very difficult. And so understanding your percentage availability across these devices allows you to provide stakeholders with, reporting that it might be an SLA and a contractual term with a third party. It might just be for a stakeholder inside the airport to say, these are the services we provide to make sure that the bathroom monitoring system is up 90% of the time or 99% of the time, or whatever we think it is based on its criticality. And if we are not meeting that, we've got all the detail there to tell you why we haven't, when the problem was, and the troubleshooting detail and context that helps you resolve that. So, I think I know that is really unable to be done with, traditional systems, even if we were just talking about surveillance cameras or something, singular in its device. It would be very difficult to get this information. When you include the plethora of devices that we're looking at, it gets even that much more difficult and, that much more valuable. So I think this is, a key thing to think about.